Welcome to Andy's Can. Today we're going to be swapping out the blower motor on this wall-mounted mini split right here. The blower motor is making a whirring noise and it's kind of distracting since this is a bedroom. So let's get to it. Whenever working on an appliance, you want to disconnect power. Either unplug it or go to your circuit breaker box and turn off the breaker. My box is marked, and here is the mini split, which is the third one down on the left, so we're going to turn that off. So the first thing we're going to do is lift the lid and assure that power has been disconnected. Going to remove the screw to the power box, go to ground. We'll go to each one of our terminals, and there is no power here or on the other terminals. Okay. Knowing that power has been disconnected now, we can move forward. So the first thing to do is to remove this lid, and on this particular lid, the display panel is on the other side of this semi-translucent panel. And since it's not easy to get to the wire over here to disconnect it, we're going to go ahead and take this panel off, let it hang free, then we can get this lid off. There are two screws holding it. There's going to be a lot of screws associated with this. I've watched a few videos on other models, and I'm going to do my best to keep track of where these screws go, and sometimes I'm just going to go ahead and put them right back in the holes. If you have a way to manage screws, use that. This wire is just routed on a couple of clips, and it just pulls right out. And for now, I'm just going to let it hang. So I'm going to remove the lid now. The lid is held in with these hinges here and here, and they just push inward and come out, inward and come out. On my unit, I've installed some IR blasters to remotely control these units with Wi-Fi. So this is hardwired right now. All I can do is just pull loose the double stick tape, and I'll leave this hanging. Now I'm going to remove the air filters. They just slide out, and you can see these need to be cleaned. The next task is to remove this outer cover. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the wire from its trace. It's just clipped behind these little plastic tabs right here, here and here, and let it hang free. So each mini split is screwed onto its evaporator coil unit differently. Mine has, it looks like these 4 screws here, and there is one screw down under here under a little panel. So yours may differ, but if you have this Nortek unit, it'll be similar or the same. So we want to remove this air damper. This lever is held in by just a push pin. You just simply push this to the right and remove it. With this center mount disconnected, the louver now bows downward, and you can just simply remove it from each end. There's a screw under this little decorative trim piece. Remove this. And the 4 screws in the front. Just note your screw difference so you'll know where they go back. With these 4 screws removed, I'm just going to lift it at the bottom to see that it is free, so there are no more screws holding it. Now we're going to unclip the top clips. On this unit, there are little gray tabs at the top. You push that down and gently pull the unit toward you, and that unclips it. As you move left to right or right to left, just know that you don't want to put any pressure down on the clips you've removed, because the unit might just reattach itself. Okay. They're not easy, but they do come off. With the clips removed, the cover just comes off. The first thing to do is to go ahead and remove this cover and gain access to the wiring. There's a ground wire here that's attached to this cover plate. I'm going to remove this. This cover just slides away from the wall. It's held on by a plastic clip right here and a little tab over here. You push this little clip to the right and then just gently pull the cover towards you. There's a small sensor over here held in with a clip. Just pull that out and this cover now detaches. Now I'm going to remove the wiring harness that comes in from the outside unit. I'm going to start with the ground. Just going to loosen them all first. Okay, now I'm just going to remove each individual wire. Before doing that, let's take a picture so we know where all the wires have gone. Okay. With cameras today on phones and no cost to take a picture, I highly recommend that at any step that you think might be difficult to reassemble, take a picture. This harness is held in place by a wire clamp. It has one screw on it, so let's pull this. We're removing this electrical box and connections because the motor is directly underneath of it. The only way to gain access is to remove this. So now we're going to pull the circuit board out and disconnect any wires associated with it. This ground wire right here comes off this terminal block. It's a lot easier to remove the entire terminal block. There's only one screw in the center of it, rather than disconnect these individual wires at the top. That way this terminal block will come off with the circuit board. Just helps to get it out of your way. And any connection you don't have to remove is one less you don't have to put back in. So I'm going to go ahead and disconnect this terminal block or remove it from its mount. It's got a single screw in the center. There's that. Pull this up out of the way. And these ground wires are routed through a small channel over here. I'm just going to go ahead and move those out of the channel. Over on the top, and they're not going to stay where you want them, of course. Okay, so now we're going to slide the circuit board out. There's a number of wires down here that have been are located in a small wire channel, so those need to be slid out so the circuit board can come out with it. Okay, so now the circuit board can be removed from the housing. Let's see, there are 3 connections that you need to remove. Let's see, one is this sensor for the evaporator coil. All these connectors are keyed and unique in size so that you can put them back without concern. With the circuit board removed and the wires more or less out of the way, we can remove this electrical box. To do that, there's a screw up on top here. Remove that. And with the wires out of the way, the electrical box just pulls toward you and then lifts up out of a little tab, a little hole that this tab sets into. All right, so the blower motor connects here. Let's see if we can get that one loose. All right, that one disconnects pretty easily. That one's disconnected. Louver motor here, which we're going to disconnect. There, got that one loose. Just this one more right here. So let's disconnect this. All right. So now our circuit board is out of the way. These wires are still connected, but we're going to leave them right there. So right here is your blower motor housing assembly. That motor will not come out of there easily by just disconnecting this or removing the screws to the housing. There are 4 screws that I can see, but the evaporator coil is definitely in the way of removing this housing. So I'm not sure how much flexibility I'll have to remove this. So 2 screws right here are very easy to get to. I'm going to go ahead and get to those first. This back screw here is pretty far down in there. The Freon lines are really tight right here, but I was able to get my screwdriver down in there to the screw. So there's a small metal bracket right here at the end of my screwdriver that appears to be holding the evaporator coil to the bracket that we need to remove. So I'm going to remove that. Probably won't be that bad to get to put back in, but it is buried. Okay. There we go. So the blower motor housing is up under the galvanized mounts for the evaporator coil. So this evaporator coil must be lifted upwards. These Freon lines hopefully are flexible just enough to get this thing up and then remove this housing right here. So I'm going to move the camera over to this side here of the evaporator coil and see what it takes to lift that side. This is the left side of the unit, and this is the bracket that needs to be removed. So on this unit, if you were not going to do the blower, you would only have to remove the 2 screws here and here, which allows this bracket to lift up. But since we need to move the blower out from under the evaporator coil, these 2 screws right here also need to be removed. That's what will allow this cover end mount to be completely removed. So I'm holding this camera, so I'm just going to go ahead and remove these screws, and as I go to take the cover off, I'll show that. With the 4 screws removed, this mounting bracket can be removed from the unit. I noted all 4 screws were the same, so that'll help for reassembly. So to remove it, the bracket is slid into a little slot right here. So it needs to be moved up almost at a 45 degree away from the wall. So you can see it's off out of its mount. And so now it just needs to be tilted off the evaporator coil. And then lifted upwards. Now it's off. So here's the blower right here. And the evaporator coil is now free at this end. So back to the other side. So you can't see it on camera, and I apologize for that. But if you look down in between the coils, down toward the motor, and on the galvanized bracket that holds all these fins in place, there's a release tab on the motor housing that allows this galvanized bracket to come upward. Now, these are your coils charged with Freon, so when you go about poking, you want to be careful. I sure hope I don't do any damage here, but that release tab has to be pushed inward, almost directly left on the unit, and then the coils need to be pulled up to disengage the motor housing. Okay, it did. There, it's loose. Very lucky. So now the entire coil assembly will lift enough to hopefully get this motor out. There it is. Okay. All right, so the motor housing is completely off now. Okay, so now I'm going to remove the set screw holding the motor onto the shaft. I'm just going to rotate it a little bit, and it's lost my Phillips bit. It's a Phillips screw, and it's right through here. Sorry for no view, but you know, when you're looking at it, you'll see it easily. Just going to put it back in and loosen it just enough so the motor will slide off the shaft. Now the blower is held in place on the motor end by the motor. So when you lift the motor, this blower should just lift with the motor. So now we're just going to lift the motor right out and then pull the shaft out of the blower. And now you have your pesky little noisy motor in your hand. So here's the replacement motor. I've compared it for size and the electrical connector and the voltage, and they are the same. They also, I ordered it via the number of the motor, and it was the same motor. So I went back and reviewed the video before I pulled the motor out, and to note the orientation of where the connector comes out of the motor. So I noticed that it's right at the seam of the motor housing mount. So it just splits the difference. On the motor mount itself, there are these 2 rubber bushings. These are actually where the motor is mounted and isolates vibration. The front mount has no orientation. It can come loose and spin, but there it is in place. The back one is not that. It has to be oriented in a certain way. There are 2 depressions. There are 2 bumps on the mount itself, right here and right here. Those have to be, this comes off. That rubber bushing has to be oriented in such a way that the bumps line up with depressions in the housing. You'll see that down inside. So it looks like this would be 90 degrees from the connector. So I'm just going to go ahead and orient that right now. I'll show you on the housing what that depression looks like. On the other housing, since this one is not viewable with the camera angle. So there is the little bump, right? Well, it's a hole for this one. Inside the housing on the unit, it's a depression. So you need to make sure that these bumps align with these. I guess it keeps it from rotating. At the very least, it won't go in if those bumps aren't aligned correctly. Now, on mine, there is a flat on the motor right there, and that is for the set screw to tighten against. So when you insert it, or at least before you tighten the set screw on the squirrel cage, you want to make sure that this flat is in the location of the set screw. So I'm going to rotate it so that the connector is toward me and the flat is close to where the screw is on the squirrel cage. So it's simply lift the blower up. By the way, if, you know what, I'm looking at the blower and it is dirty and there are recommendations to clean these periodically. I'm going to go ahead and stop the video and remove that blower, the squirrel cage blower, and I'm going to clean it. So it's already loose from this end, and I'm looking at the other end, so real quick, I'm just going to see if it lifts and moves to the left without any resistance. This is the time to clean this if you are servicing. So you need to lift this just a bit, and the blower drops right out, right out. And then you simply, if simply is a word here to use for these mini splits, you just lift it out. For me, it's easiest to remove it to the left. Just gonna leave that coil there. So it's not terribly dirty, but I can see some dust and dirt on it. Orientation is pretty obvious. There's the tightening screw that goes to the motor and just a shaft that goes into the bearing on the other side. So I'm going to stop it and go clean this. All right, so I cleaned the blower. It's not easy. Those fins are difficult to get to, but I found that I coated it with some good, cleaning solution, and did a little brushing on it, but getting on the back side of those fins is not easy. But after it's soaked on those for about 5 or 10 minutes, I took it outside with a nozzle on a hose, and that cleaned it up really nice. It looks like new again. So let's move forward. So I'm going to reinsert it by lifting a bit. Doing my best not to hit these fins. So get it past it here. And reinsert it on the bearing on the back side. And now it's back in. So I've got the nubs on the motor oriented correctly, and the shaft flat is now at the mounting screw. So I'll put those nubs down in the holes that they're supposed to go in. Once it is correctly, and it's not correct right now, I can see it has not dropped in. There, now it's in. You can see the motor is pretty much situated correctly in the mount. The shaft is now running correctly with the blower, and I'm going to slide the blower kind of left and right and center it. And just one quick look, I'm going to make sure that the flat is oriented correctly, and it's just a little off. So I'm going to, let's see if I can hold the motor and turn the blower just a little bit. There you go. So now it's on the flat. Now I'm going to reach in there. One more left to right orientation. There we go, right there. And I'm going to tighten that. Let's turn that down just a little bit. Yeah, we're hitting the coils just a little bit with the fin. The blower, I'm going to lift that just to turn it down a bit. All right, so now that screw is a little more accessible. And now tighten this down. I'm not going to go crazy. I don't want to strip that out. That was the last thing. That would be the last thing I'd want to do. But it's definitely snug in there now. So the motor is now flat in its cradle. And the blower, I'm going to lift this coil assembly and just rotate the motor to see if there's any obstructions or noise. There's not. And guess what? There's no bearing noise. Go figure. So now we're going to try and maneuver this housing back in place, which was a devil to get out, and it is not going to be any easier getting back in. I'm going to get some of these wires out of the way. So these ground wires can slip out of their little wire tie. I'm just going to go ahead and do that right now. After a good deal of wrestling, the housing threw in the towel, and I was able to get it back in. Well, one thing is for sure, having the coil up out of the way enables you to put these screws back in. So maybe that is the way to do it. There's nothing about getting this housing back into place that was easy. It was a fight the whole way. So it looks to me like getting that coil back down in the right place is going to be the next challenge. That is, it's bent upward. I can see how it has to go, but it is going to be interesting. The motor is in now. The wire's in the place it's supposed to be, which is 90 degrees. It's interesting, that motor does turn a little bit, but it's correct. I took a look at the measurements, everything's fine. So the motor rotates, the blower rotates without any noise, without any friction. So I would say the motor and the blower are back in place. Okay, so now comes the challenge of wrestling this coil back into place. It could be easy, it could be difficult. After a great deal of effort and a few choice words, I was able to get the coil back into place and snapped back into that tab back in there. And the screw hole in front is very close to perfect. When I put the screw in, it'll pull it back into place. So now I'm going to go back to the other side and put the bracket in. That's just a reverse of disassemble. I'm not going to pull the camera over there. So I'll get back to you after that's in. So in order to line up the mounting bracket with the hole, I'm using a flat blade screwdriver against the motor housing and just slightly prying it over to the left to get that screw hole aligned. But also allow me to get my screwdriver in here. Okay, that's going in. This square or tab on the bottom goes into a hole on the plastic housing, and then it pivots up for the screw, just like that. One important consideration when reinstalling the circuit board is to make sure you orient the wires in such a way that, first of all, there's enough length to get to where they have to run, but also to allow the circuit board to go in without pushing on any components. All right, so let's go for it. I believe the motor was behind, the motor wire was behind this main wiring harness. We're going to get that over out of the way. Okay, so we now need to go ahead and make the connections onto the board. So the swing motor for the damper or the louvers need to go in its respective spot. Let's see. The board's marked. It says sensor for the sensor plug, and I believe it says swing motor. Yes, it does. It says swing, and then the other one is the DC motor. Okay, so the swing motor can be put on at the very last before it boards all the way in. The sensor is kind of in the middle, so we're going to go ahead and attach that. And that goes, I'm trying to show you. It says sensor right here on the board on this connector. So, and they're keyed, and you can't put two connectors in the wrong place. You can't put a connector in the wrong place. Okay, so there, snaps in. Let's see what else we have here. Let's see, so we have the main motor also needs to connect. Let's go ahead and slide that in here. There, and that's connected. And now the circuit board needs to be routed. There are two grooves that the circuit board needs to be slid into. So we get both of those in. So now you need to try and slide it in and work all the wires in so that they're not obstructing each other or preventing the board from going all the way back. The board's bottomed out without any obstructions like this. And the sensor wire, we know that clips in down below. That's hanging out like it needs to. So the damper motor, I'm sure I called it something else, can be plugged in. It's best to try and route the wire so that it will go back in that channel underneath. That's it. Okay, so it clicked in. We can go ahead and get this terminal board back in by dropping it down into place. So I believe this motor wire can go back here. Now this is all subjective. You find the routes that work when you're putting this back together. You want covers to go back on. You want wires to have enough length, but you want them out of the way of each other. So this does tuck back in here, out of the way. So we're going to go ahead and put that in there. It's interesting routing the wires, but we'll get them in there. Okay. All right, so we have these. So this wire needs to be routed into this little channel right here. This allows it to get into the electrical box without being pinched by the cover. So all those wires are now down. These ground wires also need to go into this channel right here. One of these ground wires comes back up and connects to the front cover. This is the one. The other one just pushes further in and then goes onto this terminal right here. All right, that's good. It has been put back together, and I'm going to go ahead and put the other two in, and adding my crimp terminals off camera. With the connections made, we're going to go ahead and put this clamp on this main cable back on. So it just slides up under this little holder on the right side, and then the screw tightens down and holds this wire in place. And there is just a little bit of insulation sticking up. I'll move that up a little bit more. There we go. Now there's all insulation up under. I'm not going to tighten it over too much. This is a plastic retainer. I don't want it to snap off in time, but it's firmly held in. Now the wires need to be moved into place so that the cover will go on without any obstructions. So with that, I believe the main cover needs to go on. Alright, so I know this needs to come up through here. Yeah, it hooks in like that. So I'm just going to step up and get this top tab in place. It's an obvious little metal tab. It just slides into a little slot. This needs to come up here. And then this just snaps into place like that. So your cover is now on. Now this ground wire can be reattached. That's in. Now we need to attach this sensor to its two clips. The back looks like it wants to slide into the hole instead of snap in. And then this one will snap in like this. So your wires are now out of the way. They're routed pretty well. I'm looking, so it looks like it's time to go ahead and put the front cover back on. First thing is to route this front panel through the cover. And then bring the cover up into place. So I need to move my IR device. So get the bottom into place, like that. And then the top just snaps into place. There. So there are 4 matching screws along here. There it went. Cover. Now the louver has a orientation, so it's keyed to the shaft. So when you put it on, just make sure that that is in. Then bow it down in the center, get the left side in. And that's just a round shaft. And then use your retaining clip to refasten it to the center support. There's no orientation, it just pushes to the left, and your louver is now back in place. Put our cleaned filters back in. Okay, so now the front cover. They just go, the little hinges just push into the holes and then just snap in. There they are. And you can see they just hinge down from there. So now your view is going to be slightly obstructed when I reattach this front panel. So this panel has 2 small holders. It has 2 tabs right here, one on the top. But they just go into these 2 holders. They slide in to the left, and then just align your screws to the holes in the panel assembly. Yeah, the screwdriver is much better. Route this wire back into its clips. It just presses up in here. and then back into this channel right here with enough slack to get up here like that, well, to allow the door to open. I lift the door all the way, and that should be sufficient routing. And then just push it back under the clips like this, and then route it in here so that the cover, so that this display wire comes up through the cover. Electrical cover has a little metal insert inside, and that is to keep those wires captive. If those wires are not in the right place, this will not go down flat. Well, let's see how it goes just to begin with. So go ahead and attach it. I will end it here, and I'll bring you back once the power has been restored, and cross our fingers that everything got put back together correctly. Well, power's been restored to the unit, and as you can hear, it's working without any noise. I'm pretty happy with the job. If you have a Nortek mini split, I hope you found this video useful. It provides instructions for how to disassemble. In this case, replace the blower motor. Thanks for watching.